To our panel session on promoting effective competition enforcement in East and Southeast Europe. And let me start by thanking our host, Lear, for providing us with the opportunity to familiarize you, and thanks so much for your interest, with the work that is being done to promote better competition enforcement. We're doing this because we firmly believe that good competition authorities, sound laws, and good enforcement promote business activity, be it domestic or foreign, and so we would also like to kind of give you some inspiration how also for you as advisors, business people, and so on, you can contribute to this kind of work and possibly support us. And to this purpose, we have, well, a round of friends with lots of experience in the region, so we would like to expose you to some perspective and some experience, hopefully also have some time for Q&A. And let me start by briefly introducing our panel. We have Lefkothea and Nteka, who is partner at LAMBADARIOS law firm in Essence since 2019, has before served for more than 13 years with the Hellenic Competition Authority in various functions, among which 5 years as a commissioner, is that right? And she has supported the OECD on various events in the region, and she's also currently responsible for the judge trainings that we organize in the framework of the Regional Center of Competition in Budapest. Bill, this poor guy always has to suffer from people saying, well, he doesn't need to be introduced.
No, please go on.
No, you deserve it, sorry.
If we could begin from grade school.
Obviously, Professor and Director, Competition Law Center, George Washington Law School, used to be an FTC commissioner, and currently also in the function of non-executive director at the CMA, skipping most of the other stuff that he has done in his life. And I mean, he has tremendous experience in outreach in the region, East and Southeast Europe, but across the world, actually, and so he can even better compare. Might be different. Renato Ferrandi, my OECD colleague here, he is the manager of our Regional Center for Competition in Budapest, the OECD GVH Regional Center. They do capacity building up and down for the countries of the region, and prior to joining, so he's done it for the last 3 years, I think, right? He was for more than 20 years with the Italian Competition Authority. Myself, I've been with the OECD for 10 years now. I used to be Renato, so was in charge of the regional capacity building.
To be more precise, I'm the new Sabine.
It's a matter of perspective. And now I'm responsible for our Working Party 3 on enforcement and international cooperation, still do my fair share of capacity building, outreach, and so on. And prior to joining the OECD, I was for more than 20 years with the German Competition Authority. Now, what unites us are long years of experience and work in the countries of the region, and I think possibly even more importantly, a deep sense of friendship and commitment to the enforcers of the region and the countries. And so that's kind of the common ground from where we are going to present what we're doing there. We've selected a number of topics that are hopefully interesting to you, and we might have a chance for some Q&A, as I said. Now, during the session, afterwards, you can always contact us. Bill, starting with you as the one with the undoubtedly longest experience in the region. It's a real privilege to have you here. Bill has been one of our strongest supporters, not just us, but also UNCTAD, the other international organizations. So he is really non-discriminatory in his support for the various outreach efforts to the region. What's your perspective of where the countries of the regions come from, and what could be done in the future to further promote sound competition law enforcement?
First, Sabine, Fernando, it's a real honor to be here with you. And Lefkothea, I can't capture my admiration for what OECD has done with the RCC in particular, but in the development of its program over time, as maybe we'll discuss today, I think it's been a tremendous force for improvement. And the word you mentioned, commitment, being in it for the long term, not being a collection of development tourists who drop in, give a few talks, and then visit the souvenir stand on the way out to the airport. I think that's been indispensable in building an effective program. With another researcher, Marianela Lopez-Galdos, a few years ago, we did an extensive review of experience with new systems, the 100+ new systems created since 1990. And one thing that we noticed in the older and newer systems is that the development of an effective program simply takes a lot of time. You need perhaps 10, 20, 30 years to know how rugged the system is. You have to go through regime changes to see how they go about sustaining a program. You have to see if the pattern of appointments brings good talent to the agency over time. You have to withstand external shocks from sudden economic developments, often bad ones, that test in a very basic way how well you do. You have to see how well courts ultimately accept the framework. So to get a reliable sense of how one is doing takes a few decades, we thought. So this in many ways is a good time to do an assessment. Let me give you a few highlights of what I perceive to be very positive developments over time. First, I think when we look agency to agency, we've seen a significant uplift in the overall talent that's come into the agencies. If you compare the human capital to even 10 years ago to the basic human capital now, it's an impressive process of improvement where you get better and better people. And I think in many agencies, they've had success in keeping them for a longer time. I know that in a way, a measure of success for the agency is how many other people want to poach your own employees. If nobody wants to steal your people, that's a bad sign. And the fact that I think so many private sector and other public agencies have viewed the competition authorities as being premium institutions is an indication of their success. As a general proposition with respect to human capital, I couldn't give you a rigorous proof, but I think throughout the region, the competition agency in many respects is unsurpassed in its ability and success in attracting high-quality people. That if you look at other public institutions, maybe the central bank is an exception. You won't see a better institution, and I'm struck at the respect with which other policymakers in the countries in this region respect the competition authority as being a superb prototype for good public administration. I'm not asking you to accept the idea that all of the institutions behave perfectly. As long as human beings are involved in any process, perfection will be unattainable. But in my field in academia, we grade on a curve, and the critical question is compared to what, compared to whom? And I think the competition agencies have established themselves as the premier public policy institutions in their countries. And much of that has to do with the human talent. Second, the intellectual infrastructure that supports the development of that talent, I think, has improved across the region. Compare the number of academic programs that teach competition law now compared to 20 years ago. Economics departments that teach good courses in industrial organization economics. Look at that beginning of the pipeline that does several things. It trains the young people who will be coming into the agencies. It has a research base so that you have a critical assessment of what's taking place, sometimes a cooperative contribution to what the agencies are doing directly because the academics work with them. I don't think a competition system is sustainable unless that exists within the country or within the region. Not every country has to replicate that, but you can't support a program by having outsiders periodically come in and provide guidance about concepts, theory, and implementation. It has to come from inside the country over time. I think that infrastructure is significantly stronger now than it was 10, 20 years ago. The last thing I'll mention that I think is encouraging, and I see again a general trend of improvement, is the peer-to-peer collaboration that's taking place in the region. That's fostered by undertakings such as the RCC. The RCC's process of creating a forum in which officials can meet each other on a repeated basis, both to develop a relationship with the teaching faculty that works in the program and the administrators who oversee the program, but with peer organizations. If you can imagine each country as having a learning curve, the aggregate improvement is much greater if you can consolidate that learning and ensure that each institution has the benefit of knowledge gained from other institutions in not identical circumstances, but in similar circumstances, that have an awareness of the economic and political conditions that are special to the transition economy environment and are able to share knowledge, know-how about how to cope with those. That's dramatically better than it was even a decade or so before. I think that type of peer learning is indispensable. It's fine to have outsiders from, let's say, older systems come and give their observations, but there's no substitute to having the ongoing discussion with nations, with systems that are in a relatively similar position, because that's the know-how and experience that I think is especially valuable to the development of new institutions. And by reason of that shared learning, the building of relationships, what emerges are forms of collaboration across agencies, formal, informal, that support the development of the program. And I think all of us are aware that it's the human interaction and relationships that builds those, and it can't be done in the abstract. And it creates the trust that enables people to speak honestly about what's working well and what's not. I think in all of those dimensions, we're so much better off now than we were a short while ago, and we see it in the work that the agencies are doing. And again, Sabine, I think the intuition of the OECD to create the regional center as a forum for continuing interaction is so valuable in that process, because it enables the authorities to trust the advisors, and it gives them an opportunity to engage in this shared learning and progress. I think those are all good stories on a rainy day to think about. Not rainy here, but yeah.
Thanks so much, Bill. And let me just say, it wouldn't work without the people coming to support us, without experts actually teaching at these events and engaging with the participants. So they make for the real spirit. But that naturally leads over to my colleague Renato, as I said, is in charge of the regional center. And while the regional center on the face of it is a capacity building institution, I think it's actually a Trojan horse for more regional cooperation also. And you have some thoughts to share on this.
Thank you. Buongiorno. Good morning. I must confess that I'm a bit disappointed because I knew that I was going to speak just after Bill, and I was super stressed. Then for a moment I had the hope that he would not show up, but then he came, and it turned out for the best, because actually he framed and identified the three key points about the region, I think, and he beautifully presented it: the uplifting human talent, the academic infrastructure to support it, and the peer-to-peer collaboration and learning. So I could shut up and that would be all. But the message I would like to convey in the next 8 minutes is that despite turbulence, Eastern Europe and Central Asia is a very promising region with committed competition authorities. What we are doing with these competition authorities is to shift the focus of the activity from price regulation to bid rigging, competitive neutrality, and vibrant advocacy. So what you can expect in the near future in this area is an increase in cartel cases and down rates, and I think this is good news for the lawyers. Cases of abuse of dominance addressing conducts by SOEs, and market studies. And this is good news for the economists. Okay, now that I already spoiled the end of the story, I will go through this statement, the different parts of this statement. Despite turbulence, okay, I don't think it's necessary to explain why Eastern Europe and Central Asia is a turbulent area. My task as the manager of the OECD GVH Regional Center for Competition, and I want to highlight the role of the GVH. It's a joint venture together with the Hungarian Competition Authority, the GVH, and here we have my partner in crime, Ms. Miranda Moldar, who is the coordinator from the Hungarian side. So she's my guardian angel, as I always call her. And what we do, we organize 8 seminars a year, mostly in Budapest, sorry. Sometimes, yeah, I have this Brussels connection. And sometimes in other capitals of the region. And we invite 2 delegates from each of our 18 beneficiary competition authorities, which span from the Balkan region to Russia included. Okay, no longer included now, but it used to be included. And you have to imagine that basically we sit at a rectangular table. So on the speakers that I invite, I always invite 3 experts from more advanced jurisdictions. The 3 speakers and myself sit on the short side of the rectangle, and then in the U shape, you have all the delegates with the nameplate, actually the name of the country, in alphabetical order. And of course, they are all dressed up. They know they represent their country. And of course, since destiny loves to play with us, Armenia and Azerbaijan sit next to each other, and you know they're in a never-ending conflict. On the other side, I have Ukraine and Russia sitting together. And then, of course, in the room, I have representatives from the Balkanic region. So Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and so on. So the first time I was chairing the seminar, I said, I will not survive this. What's going to happen? And what happens actually is that after the first day, we go out together to a restaurant, that we have a social event like here, we drink some beers together, and people start realizing that they have a lot in common. And after 3 days, because the conference lasts 3 days, they are the best friends. I have a beautiful memory. It was in Sarajevo, that it was the last night, so we kept, the objective was to visit basically all the pubs in Sarajevo, and the only survivors were my friends from the Balkanic area and myself, and they ended up sharing their memories as children during the war. And they were former enemies. And I said to myself, this is beautiful. This is really well beyond cooperation on competition. This is really building the basis for a more peaceful environment. That's amazing, I think. Anyway, so turbulence. Then, despite that, it is a very promising region. Just a few data. You should know that over the last 2 decades, for example, Romania has reduced the gap in GDP per capita to the OECD average by half, from minus 70% to minus 35%. Can you imagine what kind of increase this is? Another country is Georgia. Between 2005 and 2019, the average rate of growth of the GDP was 5% every single year. It's something we cannot, in Western countries, we cannot even dream. A similar rate of growth was in Western Balkans. Then, during the first decade of 2000, then it slowed down a bit. And you shouldn't think that it is a very traditional economy. One example is Hungary. In Hungary, there is a 23% share of e-commerce over overall retail. Just to give you a benchmark, that means that 1/4 of all purchases in retail are done online. Just to give you a benchmark, in the US, it's 16%. You see? By the way, I said e-commerce and didn't say digital. I think I will be the only speaker at the conference that will not say the word digital. Okay. But not only it's a problem in the region, but we have committed and qualified competition authorities. Okay, they are typically understaffed and with limited financial resources. This is a real issue. Here there is let's say, a minimum efficient scale issue, because whenever you have a small economy, I mean, you need a critical mass to build an effective competition authority. So either you spend too much with respect to the overall GDP to create an efficient authority, or you spend the same average as other countries, but that ends up in a very limited staff. So this is an issue. But the staff at these competition authorities you basically have two generations. The older generation that is very experienced, but not necessarily that qualified. And then you have the new generation. We have two Serbian colleagues here who are extremely qualified. They studied in the best universities. They are super motivated, and they are really dedicated. So there is really potential. You mentioned the uplift.
Do you tell that to everybody when
of
you
course,
meet with them?
Of
Yes,
course.
so do I. Good.
But, okay, of course, there are different situations. You have competition authorities in the EU, so Romania. We have Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia among our beneficiaries. You have you have Russia that has a different history, but very active in competition. And then you have let's say, the newcomers, Serbia, Georgia, Moldova, even countries that you would not think about, like Azerbaijan. They had a recent change in the management coming from the private sector, and they're really boosting the activity of the competition authority. So we really need to seize the opportunity. Okay, I will. Okay, I will close saying that for obvious reasons, what we're trying, all these countries have a common feature. They come from a regulated market, of course, and we are trying to change the mindset and focus on bid rigging. Why bid rigging? Because it accounts for 12% in OECD member states, maybe public procurement. You can imagine in these countries it can account up to 30%. So if you detect bid rigging, you really contribute to the welfare of the economy. Competitive neutrality, just one figure. The average share of value added of SOEs in OECD member states is 5%. In these countries is between 10 and 20%. Can you imagine the political pressure? Can you imagine the importance of state-owned enterprises? So it's important that these authorities advocate for competitive neutrality, for a level playing field between private and public companies. And advocacy, their competition authorities in this area are already very active in advocacy, and what they're doing, they are engaging in a number of market studies. Serbia is leading the front with a number of market studies, but I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Lefkothea, who will elaborate on that. So I will speak about the review at the end. Okay.
Just one word before Lefkothea starts, because she's one prime example of people who are supporting us, and also, even since she switched sides, she has stayed a huge supporter. And I'd just like to mention, to give you an example, there are other people in the room who have supported the RCC as speakers. Liliana, Marcus have been there. Fabian, I'm not sure, but at least the Bundeskartellamt on many occasions sends us experts. So again, thanks so much for this. And Lefkothea is going to share her thoughts on legal and enforcement challenges, right?
Well, yes, that's not the so much fun and interesting part today. I was lucky enough for this process to be with Renato that night in Sarajevo, and you really get this really intense feeling why those programs and cooperation are really important. I also participated and represented the Greek Competition Authority in ECN for many years. And I think this is one great big success for competition authorities. And having worked for a competition authority that was really young when I've joined, I have followed this process of how the legal framework and the institutional framework can very much influence how competition authority develops, and of course cooperation between competition authorities. And I see now also all these changes in the region, which is really important to actually promote effective competition enforcement, because yes, you need a solid institutional setup that allows for an independent authority populated by experts, motivated people that will join the authority for that reason, with sufficient financial resources. You need a set of broad and comprehensive investigative and decision-making powers, coupled with a procedure framed in such a way as to safeguard the rights of defense. We've seen clear goals of competition policy, competition authorities in the region developing clear goals, adapting effective systems of prioritizing cases. Judicial review is essence. That's the main interlocutor of a competition authority. They shape together in our competition policy, so that's really important. And of course, cooperation mechanisms with peers, as Bill said, that allow for exchange of views, knowledge, and experience. Also, quite significantly, I would say enforcement cooperation. We also need enforcement cooperation. That is cooperation in the actual investigation and handling of cases through, for example, exchanges of evidence and cooperation in investigative measures. Now, on top of the legal framework, what in my view works best for effective enforcement is enforcement itself. Okay? And competition authorities in the region have an amazing growth in cases that they deal with and the decisions that they issue. So failures and successes in building and proving cases, development of economic analysis skills, detection capabilities, investigatory practices, the use of a wide range of decision-making powers, and testing all the above before courts, that's what leads to a more effective, all those factors leads to a more effective competition enforcement and cooperation. I will stay a bit on those two issues, enforcement cooperation and enforcement. As Bill and Renato already mentioned, regional cooperation has developed for a lot of reasons in the region. So there, of course, a deeper interdependence with other economies in the same region. There are similar levels of economic development. There are similarities in their legal systems. But still, in practice, the level of enforcement cooperation, cooperation in actual cases, working together in actual cases, is rather limited. Why so? We already know from many reports, including the 2021 OECD and ICN joint report on international cooperation, that cooperation in enforcement cooperation faces a lot of legal limitations, okay? Especially relating to confidential information sharing and investigative assistance. So what we nowadays consider as granted, as common, as everyday in the context of ECN, and I'm referring to cooperation in concrete cases, taking evidence in another country, joint investigative measures, exchange of data and information and evidence, assistance in serving legal acts that we will now see under ECN+. All the above are quite difficult to achieve outside a legal framework, as that of EU law. Indeed, competition authorities in Eastern Europe participate in projects spanning from consultation, knowledge, and experience sharing to technical assistance, also in cooperation with international institutions as RCC, and the work done by RCC is a prime example of that. They have also put in place different forms of cooperation agreements, such as mainly memoranda of understanding that allow for keeping each other informed of cases of common interest, discussing theories of harm, investigative strategies, providing the one to the other publicly available information, documents and reports, sharing leads maybe and comparing authorities' approaches to different issues, even coordinating, we could say, surprise inspections, but not joint inspections. In practice, though, we still have a fragmentation of competition laws. We have different types of information gathering and decision-making powers, and we have different legal requirements that limit actual cooperation in cases, in information exchanges, and having, let's say, joint investigative measures. Is there a way to overcome these legal barriers where there are let's say, different legal models of enforcement cooperation that we could discuss, starting from having just national provisions that say that competition authorities should cooperate, the competition authorities should cooperate with other authorities in the region, having bilateral or multilateral agreements that the latter ones are more difficult, even more difficult to negotiate. We could think of mutual legal assistance agreements, trade agreements, competition cooperation agreements, and so on. But I think that what is most evident when we talk about tools like that is that for enforcement cooperation to go further, we need a governmental involvement, governmental cooperation and governmental acts, because otherwise those legal requirements cannot be overturned, cannot be overcome unless we have cooperation agreements that are signed, let's say, at a higher level, not just at the level of competition authority. Now, coming to enforcement, bid rigging, which is really an issue key to my heart, provides a really prime opportunity for national competition authorities to develop both enforcement and advocacy. Yesterday in the enforcers panel, we heard almost all authorities refer to their enforcement record against bid rigging. Bid rigging cases are a top priority for competition authorities in Eastern Europe, which have issued a significant number of bid rigging decisions. Why is this a prime opportunity? Bid rigging cases are a prime opportunity to boost enforcement, to boost competition policy. In my view, for many reasons. First of all, they touch upon sectors of the economy, different sectors of the economy that are crucial for the functioning of the state and for the well-being of the citizens. Secondly, they are antitrust 101. You have a cartel case where competitors agree on prices and share markets and contracts. Quite often, this is really simple in its structure. You have to deal with key legal concepts for competition enforcement. Burden of proof issues are quite key. You have ample room to develop detection tools, investigative powers, as we heard yesterday. And this is something that the judiciary can easily relate to. It comes across, they understand the harm, what's the actual harm there. And so you have an opportunity to build a body of case law regarding those provisions. And moreover, there is also ample room for advocacy, for plenty of advocacy initiatives, vis-a-vis both business operators and procurement authorities or other governmental bodies that actually shape procurement legislation in the country. And competition authorities in the region have in this way influenced the domestic landscape. They have gained in credibility, they have built confidence, and those themselves are, again, key factors for boosting enforcement. The more you enforce, the more confident you become with that, then the more initiatives you are willing to take up. It builds gradually a mentality, and we have seen that in the region, and we have seen that, I think, in recent years a lot. And if you like, later on, we can even mention specific examples. My last point, if I have time, yes, thank you, is a few words on market studies that Renato mentioned. I also believe that, of course, we all know that they are key, they play a key role in boosting antitrust enforcement. To effectively enforce, authorities have to familiarize themselves with different sectors of the economy and understand how businesses operate in different markets. I will use the word digital because nowadays we're facing increased complexity in addressing cases, and we have all these different sectors that we are still trying to map as the digital economy and understand the competitive environment, and they are currently evolving. Acquiring that knowledge, we all know, is a painstaking exercise for competition authorities because you have an intense, very, very quick learning curve for that, which of course makes working for a competition authority so interesting and so fascinating, I would say. But it's also necessary to develop competition policy, and if I might say, to intervene with confidence in cases and in sectors, and design solutions, think about solutions, and deal with cases. But I also think that market studies could also be a very a way to boost cooperation. It would not be enforcement cooperation, but it would be something similar to enforcement cooperation. Why? Because in the context of market studies and market inquiries, we do not face all those legal constraints. So it is easier, for example, to, let's say, launch parallel market studies in the region. I suppose for the economies are similar, there should be a lot of link points there. It is easier to exchange information or general information or knowledge that you gather in those, through those sectors inquiries. It is easier to coordinate results, conclusions, especially in sectors that there is cross-border and affects a lot of region, and of course even to coordinate measures proposed. And that could be, let's say, a next step, a next level to the cooperation in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lefkothea, and don't worry, I'm not going to take up much time now because I want you to engage and intervene a bit. Just saying thank you. You're obviously speaking to my heart now, having transitioned into being responsible for the international cooperation work stream of the OECD's competition division and the committee. I mean, this is a topic that is also super relevant for the OECD countries. And when we're talking enhanced cooperation, so everything that can be done within the ECN, but not outside, every country struggles. And so let me just say that for you to take note that this is one of the main topics for the coming years of the OECD's competition committee. We really want to make progress there, and we're very much hoping to achieve significant progress in the next couple of years. Also, what I wanted to mention, the Budapest RCC is not the only one. We are having 2 other regional centers for competition, one in Asia, and our baby one, well, 2 years old now already, I think, is the Latin American Competition Center. And taken together, they do precisely this capacity building on the front of it, fostering regional cooperation at the heart of it, and friendships and relationships for more than 60 countries, 60 non-OECD countries. So that is really significant reach, and it's all done in the same spirit. I really don't want to add much because everything has basically been said. Just for you possibly also as a resource, we are not doing these trainings and capacity building and whatever initiatives just based on gut feeling. We're trying to have solid foundations, and whenever we can, we will go into the country and do a more thorough analysis of the competition law and policy framework. There are what's called OECD peer reviews, and UNCTAD does very similar things, and we're not competing, we're really complementary in that. And these peer reviews also provide us with the insights that we need to know where do we need to focus on. And the areas have been mentioned: cartel enforcement, market studies, competitive neutrality, bid rigging, and so on and so forth. But, and more in-depth ones we have recently done, more or less recently, last 5 years, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Eurasian Economic Union, and, oh my God, my memory, Ukraine, of course, and constantly, and we're still, and I think that is good news. Ukraine is alive and kicking. We are in very close contact. We are conducting trainings. Just in 2-3 weeks, you're going to Warsaw to carry out a training for the Ukraine colleagues in Warsaw with the Polish colleagues. So there's a lot of engagement going on.
Ukraine is one of the great modern success stories.
It is, absolutely. And so lots of what we do is based on these insights, and these insights have been summarized, but I think it's also important to note again, or to mention again, when we go there, we might find lots of shortcomings, lots of things to criticize, but the recommendations in the end, I think if there's a common theme, they mostly go to the governments and not to the agencies, because guess what we see, and has been said, we see lack of resources, we see shortcomings in the institutional framework, independence, these topics. We see insufficient enforcement tools, insufficient investigation tools, lack of dawn raid powers, and we see problems with judicial review, judges who are not trained, judges who are afraid of these sometimes complicated economic cases, who then resort to, well, what they also do in our countries, procedure, no? And when then going there and trying to change things and to recommend, I think one lesson I learned during the trainings and communicating with the countries is really that there's always more than one way of doing things. So be careful what you say and to easily dismiss approaches because they might actually work. And that's what we learned from the other developed countries we're working with, and we're getting the insights. And be free of arrogance, because we don't actually have any reason to be arrogant as developed countries, because if you think about it, institutional design, independence, resources, we're all struggling there. And we could all be doing much better if our governments provided us with better. I mean, we have heard yesterday, these agencies are generating benefits to the economy. I mean, in actual monetary terms, just in terms of fines, which is a vast multiples of their budgets, not counting the actual benefits to the economy. And that is true for Western countries, for so-called advanced jurisdictions, and even more so for the developing jurisdictions. And institutional independence, the number of cases we have in Western European countries where we see fishy replacements of heads of agencies, well, think about it. No reason for arrogance, and I think that's really what drives our work and what makes it impactful in a way. Comments? Questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very rich presentation. My name is Liliana Eskenazi, and I come from one of those Eastern European countries which have since joined the European Union. So to some extent, they went on the other side of the barrier and have become trainers in their turn. And I have a lot of admiration and acknowledge all the work that the OECD is doing there. It's great in terms of capacity building and training. And I had two questions, which I think, Sabine, you really pinpointed and started maybe already answering, but I still will try to reformulate them. The first one is clearly on political influence. I mean, I followed, even though I left my country in the 90s, so a long time ago, but I still kept following how they evolved. And it was really a lot of progress and in terms of capacity building, training, knowledge, etc. But I have the impression of some kind of stagnation now, and I have the feeling that after the first years when there was a very strong incentive, which was acceding the European Union, this was kind of the target that kept those countries going and making changes because they had to integrate the acquis communautaire, so this was really a very strong incentive. But once they were in, I have the feeling that there was really slowdown and even stagnation, and I also have the feeling a lot of political influence. So how do you fight against political influence? What are the tools that you use to incentivize those countries to strengthen the independence of the authorities? Because this is really, even if you have qualified people, motivated people, when behind you have a government that just is corrupted or has the means to influence, that's really a problem. And the second question, and you also touched upon this, Sabine, is the judicial system, because it's not sufficient to train the agencies, but you also need to have a very strong judicial review system, which is also independent, which is also an issue. What are the incentives that you use? Are there any, I don't know, financial programs or other tools that you use to improve this? Thank you.
I think as a larger community, we have so far to go in talking about politics in an honest and effective way. And I blame older agencies for this. There's a tendency for older agencies to say they are so highly evolved that no one would ever dare to apply pressure. The question isn't whether there is politics in competition law. That's asking whether there's oxygen in the air. Yes, it envelops us. The real question is how you deal with what might be called destructive political intervention, and at the same time, how you can use the political system to get things you want along the way that Sabine was just talking about. Independence, I've found, is such an awkward word. It can suggest isolation. One needs to be engaged with the political process. You need to have a conversation with elected officials because they give you money, they give you power, they give you so many of the resources you need in order to be effective, and they will listen to you when you tell them that they're about to drive off a cliff. And you say, don't do that, or do more of this. Those all require a continuing engagement with the political process. To my mind, where the zone of autonomy that must be protected at all costs is the decision to prosecute and the decision to investigate. And because ultimately, you have to go in front of a court. What's your main argument in front of a court? We're the experts. We have great technical judgment. If it appears to the court that you acted because you had a pistol fixed to your temple, you don't get any deference. You were the subject of extortion. So demonstrating that technical proficiency guided your decisions is crucial to protecting that autonomy. But independence often suggests isolation. That's the wrong model. I think what one needs is, and this is an expansion of collaborative forums, one needs more instances in which political senior leadership will talk to each other honestly about what's happened. Small room, you can't have it at a big table. If you have the big table with 300 people in the room, people are on stage, they're performing, and they give you a completely unreliable view about what's going on. The stories you want to hear are about how people coped with the pressure. And there are lots of good stories, but they're hidden because people don't want to talk about that. So a small gathering, I've seen this work in a number of instances where you get heads of agencies. The beginning, and you could do it in the region, the beginning of the conversation is extremely difficult. That is, who wants to go first? Nobody. It's like being in a bad seminar with students who haven't done the reading and won't talk. But at some point, someone will say, here's a problem I've got. We have a merger, head of the parliament called, head of a ministry called, what do I do? That generates a useful conversation among the group, and there are some techniques. So one thing I'd love to see about this is, I would like to see more workshops, seminars where you assemble agency leadership to have them talk about this issue. And if the older agencies will not engage honestly on this, we won't get there. They have to, I mean, did I get phone calls all the time from exalted, sometimes called mature jurisdiction, but the pressure is ubiquitous. The issue is how you cope with it. And so the conversation among agency leadership to talk about this, and I've seen that happen. I've seen Fordham University has run a couple of those workshops. Those have been some of the best 2 or 3 hours. People walk out of there with two impressions. One is, thank God I'm not alone. That is, this happens to everybody. And the other is, I learned something about how to deal with this. But the second is, based on what we know about what happens and how to deal with it, I would love to have a workshop for recently appointed leaders saying, this is what's coming at you, and this is how you have to think about it. That is the workshop that that says this is what's coming up. We don't have that kind of workshop yet, quite. But first to have an honest conversation about what's going on, and then to distill some of the lessons from that, make them available to people who have to do it the next time.
Thanks so much. I don't want to keep you much longer from a coffee break. Lefkothea, 1 minute on the judge trainings to answer the second part of your question, and then last word to Renato, who has a present. Yes.
Okay. Yes, lots of stories to say on what Bill said. We can talk about that during coffee break if you like. Now, about judges' trainings. As I said, I mean, it is our view that courts are the main interlocutor of a competition authority. And when you are building your practice, you need to have that discussion with the court. Why is that? Because quite very often you're thinking, should I try this case out? Should I interpret this provision in that way or the other? Should I use this power in one way or the other? And then you need guidance. And you will only get this guidance by the court. It's not so easy to find guidance anywhere else. I mean, yes, you look at best practice of other authorities and so on, but still, that's the real guidance that you're going to get. And so training judges to competition law should be key, and having a judicial system in place and training judges to competition law should be key. We have been doing now this, the RCC has been doing this for many, many years. I've been lucky enough to be a part of this for the last years. Is it easy? No. First of all, it's not quite easy to attract judges to come to seminars or training or exchanges of formation of that type.
They don't need any training.
Yes, okay, sometimes
they don't like the word training. Exactly. I had a judge say, I'm not a dog, you do not train me. I said, okay, seminar, dialogue.
Okay, whatever you call it, the substance remains the case, and the same. And in my view, it's not even one way, it's two-way. It's two ways, it's a two-ways exchange, because when you are there, you get questions or you hear opinions that have informed the way I understand the world in competition law, very much so, I must say. Yes, first of all, is their standing, what they perceive of themselves in the world that they live in. But then if they actually come there, my experience is that they're very interested in that subject. They very much like it, but still we have to consider the way they themselves deal with those cases. It's very different to be a competition expert and to work for a competition authority where you have the opportunity to see a number of cases, cartels, abuse of dominance, mergers, whatever, and in a number of sectors, and you have a holistic view of what is happening of the law itself. Judges just look at specific cases, and depending on the output of competition authorities, they may see 1 case per year, 5 cases per year, or, I don't know, other jurisdictions, more cases per year. But this also really much affects the way they understand the law and the way we have to approach that discussion with them. Thank you.
And just the final advertising moment, just to share with you 2 initiatives of the Regional Center for Competition. One is, you can see there, we launched a sort of online course on competition, which is called Key Competition Principles Explained in Few Minutes. So the challenge is in 6, 7, 8 maximum minutes to explain bid rigging, abuse of dominance, market definition. And I must say we had an incredible success. I mean, numbers are limited because number of viewers on YouTube are limited for the competition world, but for example, our bestseller on bid rigging is the most viewed OECD comp video ever. So just to tell you, so if you can use it for training purposes, I think it's fine. And the second initiative, we have a regional review, which is called Competition Policy in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And we have just today we are launching in partnership with Lear a special edition on regional cooperation, which was mentioned several times. So you can find articles by Fred Genia, the chair of the OECD Competition Committee, by Sabine, our expert in international cooperation, by myself about the region. You have data, and you have declarations by all the presidents of the different competition authorities in the area. So I think it's a very interesting overview of what is happening in the region and what is the potential and the drivers to enhance regional cooperation. So please take a copy and bring it with you. It's light, so I think you can.
It's also available online, as are the past ones, a really big resource for the region. Thanks so much for your interest and for your patience, and big round of applause for Lefkothea and Bill. And we're happy to answer any questions now or later. You can contact us whenever. Sure.